Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. The subject of this hearing, Mr. Chairman, is fixing FISA, correct? And so, with all due respect, Mr. Kiko, I heard the comment you made that was along the lines of that both parties agree. On one of the most significant abuses of FISA, we do not have agreement, and that was in regards to one President Donald J. Trump. It was abused, and Mr. Durham highlighted what an abuse it was of FISA, and we have many people, including on this panel, that still will not recognize that. And that is dangerous for the American Republic, because if you have a Praetorian Guard that thinks they can take down a president, are we all free? Are we all free? Mr. Turley, building off from Mr. Gates's question, so let's say we don't authorize, what will happen? Let's say we didn't, will there be things that fill in the gaps? Do we have existing law?
Well, thank you for asking that question, because there is what economists sometimes call a path dependency that can set in with these types of programs, that you can't imagine not having 702. I can, because 702, and many of the members of this panel can, because we were here. You were in Congress. I was testifying when 702 was created. So there was an existence before 702, and Rome did not burn, that you have a system that can handle it. The question is whether Congress feels that these abuses are so serious that you want to use a rule that if you abuse it, you lose it. That is, this is not the first time the FBI has come before you and said, oops, we misunderstood the law. Oops, we did millions of improper searches. Oops, we actually violated the privacy of citizens in exactly the way that people said would happen. At some point, Congress has to decide whether 702 was a good path to take. If it decides to reauthorize 702, the solutions are very, very clear.
Mr. Turley, if the people are not honorable in those agencies, is it even fixable?
Well, part of the problem I had with Director Wray's testimony this week is when he talked about FISA, he kept on saying that was that earlier director. Well, the director may have changed, but the people in the FISA system have not. There's been a consistent culture of violations here that go back throughout the history of FISA. And this gets to, again, this sort of premise that was the flaw of FISA of trusting the government to act on good motivations. And I think that it's repeatedly shown, quite frankly, it cannot be trusted with that level of discretion.
Unfortunately, I only got 5 minutes here. You want to get a couple more questions. Mr. Scheer, Mr. Gates once again said, tactically, what should the reforms be? What would be one reform that you would say needs to be done if Section 702 is left in place? Turn your mic on.
Several of us have come up with a list of reforms, and there are over 25 of them. Perhaps the most important is the warrant requirement, the probable cause requirement that we discussed earlier. And if I could just briefly answer the question that you asked earlier, Congressman, as a former White House counsel lawyer, the answer that I would give to your question as to why it would be a mistake just to let Section 702 expire is that you then have a statutory vacuum which the executive branch loves. If you're a lawyer in the White House or the Justice Department, you're going to ask, the question you're going to ask is, if we do this, will we be violating any law? And if there's no law on point, your inclination is going to be to ask, well, does the president have an inherent authority to do this thing that the intelligence community wants to do? And of course, they tend to read presidential authority broadly. And so if there's no statute that governs the issue, you're basically going to be opening the door to the White House and Justice Department lawyers to come up with creative
So you're concerned
rationales.
that we'd be ceding authority to the executive?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And it's not their role.
So what if there was a penalty of removal of qualified immunity for somebody that abused this?
I think that's something that ought to be considered.
Okay, I got to get one more question in here. Ms. Goitine, Mr. Turley did a terrific job of anticipating my question. Did you hear the testimony of Director Wray?
I did not. I was busy preparing for this hearing.
Well, I would just say to you that you were incredibly prepared, and we really appreciate that. Mr. Chairman, I just want to say thank you for putting together this panel. It's one of the finest that I've been before.
Thank you. Thank you. They have